Define and defy, hackathon, Morales and Google. 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 Define, hackathon, Morales and Google. Define and define, hackathon, Morales and Google. Define and define, hackathon, Morales and Google. Define and define, hackathon, Morales and Google. 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 Morales and Google.
All right. Can't get enough of that hackathon theme song. Welcome, developers, hackathon participants, and DeFi builders. This is the very first workshop of Morales and Google defining DeFi. I'm Phil, head of events for Morales, and I'm joined today by Manny of Polygon. Welcome, Manny. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. Yourself, Phil? How's it going?
I'm doing excellent, and I'm really excited to have Polygon here, one of our founding protocols, a protocol that we've supported since launch, here to join us on this hackathon endeavor, do a workshop with us. I understand we're going to be talking a little bit about multi-sig and bridging. Am I correct, Manny?
That's correct. Yeah. We'll be talking about how we can get some of those sweet assets on your multi-sig wallets, basically.
Perfect. Well, here, let me, I see you have your screen shared. I'm going to pull that up and take it away, sir.
All right. So today, bridging assets onto Polygon, or how to get your tokens onto Polygon Gnosis safe. That should be this small typo. But first, just small little bit about me, just small, like a little summary of myself. I'm Manny. I've been in tech for probably 14 years. I'm also a developer relations engineer at Polygon. Follow me on Twitter. Definitely scan this QR code. I do events. I do workshops like these as well. But that's a little bit about myself, and I'll kind of jump into the presentation. So before we begin, just warning, there's a lot of steps to this in terms of this workshop. The goal of it is really to be able to kind of just give you a walkthrough, or in terms of a storyline of how I got to different, how you can get to different ways of getting your assets onto a specific product that's built out from Polygon in that sense. But there is a lot of steps, so I'll go through a lot of them. You feel free to ask any questions as they come in, but I'll happy to answer some more at the end. But today we're really covering in terms of bridging those assets specifically onto Gnosis Safe in that sense. So today's agenda, just to start, what we're going to be looking at is there's a website called safe-bridge.polygon.technology. This is a bridge that's specifically made for Gnosis Safe, so a multi-sig wallet. By Gnosis in that sense, to be able to bridge assets from Ethereum to Polygon in that sense. So you might be asking yourself, like why you might want to do this, just briefly. Well, the number one reason is probably because your assets are going to be a lot cheaper on Polygon. So what this does is there's really interesting ways of being able to take an existing ERC20 token that you might have at a DAO, or some sort of token that exists that you're using for, a means of monetary aspect, or some sort of utility in that sense. And there is a way for you to be able to transfer it directly over, make an exact copy of it onto Polygon and use it for transactions, and use it in the same way, nearly the same way as you would on Ethereum, right? So this is a bit what we're getting there, but we're going to get to the process of just trying to get this set up. So there's a lot of steps as to like, also just, it's a very intro in terms of understanding what would be the steps of getting both of these set up. How would you go about it? How would you get, your certain assets? What's available in terms of functionality, and just going through it. So the first step we're going to do is, before anything, we need to build out some Gnosis Safe wallets. So if you're unfamiliar with this is a multi-sig wallet. A multi-sig wallet is, there's an ERC standard for this as well, but Gnosis has actually created a product of this that's really, really intuitive, very, very user-friendly in that sense, where you can kind of create your own wallet, add multiple signers so that any transaction needs approval from multiple wallets that are owners in that sense to be able to approve those transactions. So, but for this, we're going to need to create two wallets, because we're going to create one on Ethereum, where we're going to load up some of our assets on there. And then we're going to have another Gnosis Safe that's going to be our Polygon Gnosis Safe, or our multi-sig wallet, that we're going to essentially transfer some of those assets over. So just to get an idea, is like, this is like the first step. And I'm going to walk through a lot of these steps, and you might see a lot of screenshots. And the reason why you see a lot of screenshots is because, as you can imagine, doing these live, sometimes seeing the transaction and getting people to wait for transactions to complete can actually be quite long. So I did us the favor of doing a lot of the screenshots beforehand, so that everybody knows what the different steps are, and understanding, even some of the hurdles that you might be dealing with in terms of dealing with, just setting up a Gnosis Safe. So the first thing you're going to do is, you're really going to go to gnosis-safe.io. You're going to create a transaction, create essentially a new contract, where it's going to ask you, what wallet addresses do you want associated to this as the safe owners for this multi-sig. In this sense, really, all you're doing is you're giving it, a name, you're giving it, you're reviewing in terms of the number of owners, and you're going to also probably say, like, how many owners are allowed to sign. In this sense, this was one, but afterwards, when I deployed the contract, I modified that so that 2 signers are required to be able to complete a transaction. So wallet A, B, and C are all separate wallets, and they're all owners of this multi-sig. And you kind of see, like, when you're going through this transaction, you might say, okay, well, we almost got this multi-sig. The cost is, it's just the gas, but this time was only like $9.53 in terms of US dollars. Pretty great. But what you'll also see sometimes is, that that transactions won't actually go through, because, the gas kind of increases as the network gets congested. And this is another, one of the issues that kind of happens, especially on Ethereum, because as more transactions are coming, it congests the network, and then obviously the cost goes up significantly. So there's actually, I had to increase the transaction speed up to increase the incentive in terms of how much money or how much ETH I needed to spend just to be able to approve this contract. But as you will encounter this from time to time, just setting up your Gnosis Safe in that sense. So once you have your Gnosis Safe set up, we have it, where our next step is really going to be able to kind of just establish a Polygon Safe as well. So it's really simple. Once you set it up, you have your wallet, you're able to see your assets, and right now we have nothing in there. But later on, I'll show you, I've transferred a few different types of tokens to it to see what's supported to. But we have our Ethereum safe wallet, but now we're going to go through the process of actually establishing a Polygon Safe wallet. Now, if you're anybody who is who has ETH and is trying to convert it to Polygon, the steps are a little bit, the steps, I'm going to show you what is the process of me trying to go through different steps of getting Polygon or just Matic, native Matic, in terms of into our wallet to be able to pay for that Gnosis Safe, right? Because we need to do, in order to pay for a transaction on Polygon for a Gnosis Safe on Polygon network, we need Polygon Matic in that sense, right? So we're going to go through that process. So one of the ways that you can actually convert Ethereum to Polygon is you can go to wallet.polygon.technology. And the main way you're going to be able to do this is actually through a bridge. So in this sense, you're bridging essentially Ethereum tokens into a wrapped Ethereum. And a wrapped Ethereum in this sense is going to be living on Polygon. So it actually burns the Ethereum on the Ethereum side, and then creates a wrapped token of the equivalent on Polygon side of things. And what this does is that again, it just creates a wrapped Ethereum token. So we're actually going to go through a next step. And what you'll notice, though, is when you do this, the process actually takes quite a while. It can take sometimes up to 30 minutes for this transaction to go through. So I'm going to show you also another way that you can actually go through this process that some people go through too as well, but it definitely adds other transactions to it. So you can imagine going back, I processed here, I went to the bridge, I'm transferring ETH to wrapped ETH on Polygon, and I'm waiting for the confirmation to go through. It might take sometimes up to 30 minutes in that sense. So it's a long process. So maybe a faster route, you might be thinking, maybe I'll just go to Uniswap and just, swap some ETH for Matic in that sense, right? That should be an easy way to be able to swap tokens out, right? Well, the thing is that when you're doing that, you're actually creating wrapped Polygon Matic tokens on Ethereum in that sense. This was actually before, this is before the second bridge that was kind of established, but here we have, I've transferred over some ETH into Matic, but this is wrapped Matic. So again, you have to understand that if you converted that, you've kept it on the Ethereum network. You haven't transferred anything over to Polygon. So you're probably thinking, okay, well, I have this Matic, so how am I going to get this onto Polygon now? Because I have it wrapped. I need a way to be able to get it to Polygon in that sense too. Well, Polygon actually offers a few different on their site, actually on the documentation. Some of the UI has actually changed because we've gone through a lot of wallets and different bridges updates in that sense, but does recommend a few different exchanges that you can do this. And Hop is one of them as another exchange. And what you're essentially doing here is you're going to be transferring your Matic into actual, like your wrapped Ethereum Matic into Polygon Matic. And as you can see, I'm showing all these transaction costs going for each step to kind of show you like just the process of what it looks like to be able to do these different transactions. It can get costly over time, and you're seeing it over and over again. Like, hey, this a little bit of ETH here, a little bit of ETH there, right? And we're able to kind of transfer about 20 wrapped Matic to actually Polygon Matic onto the network through Hop Exchange, and it will also take a bit of time as well. It can take sometimes up to 20-30 minutes. So even if you do it on the Polygon bridge side of things, at least that gives you a way for you to do it directly into essentially Ethereum, into a wrapped Ethereum on Polygon side. And this would be in a scenario where sometimes people go onto their MetaMask wallet and they're like, oh, why don't I just do some of the exchanges and just switch it over to Matic, or go to Uniswap and switch over to Matic in that sense. Maybe I'm thinking this is an easy way to just get Polygon Matic right away. Well, the issue is you're just getting a wrapped Matic token in that sense, an ERC20 token, but nevertheless, you got to still transfer it over into Matic so that it can burn on that side and then create it actually on Polygon Matic on that network. So once the transaction's gone through, we can kind of see, which is a little bit of a bonus, is that doing the transaction, sometimes they'll give you, on the wallet side of things, will actually give you an airdrop for a small amount of Matic. In this sense, I got 8 cents, which is, well, it's better than nothing. But once you do when you do the deposit, you're like, great, now I have my Ethereum there, right? Like, as in, I'm sure that I can use it as like Matic in that sense. Right, but the issue is that Ethereum is still wrapped, so we still need another process transaction to be able to convert it into actual Polygon Matic, which we need for the Gnosis safe in this sense. Now, what you'll notice is that I didn't give the values here, but when you're doing the process transactions here, to do these transactions, it's like 0.00001 Matic. So in this sense, the transaction costs are actually quite significantly cheaper, because if we can think of it, so what we saw before in terms of the pricing, it's like, nearly like just literally a couple cents basically of during these transactions. So already, because we have it on the Polygon network side of things, a wrapped Ethereum just converting into Matic is a very easy transaction. And again, it's going to be much faster, and the transaction fees are going to be much lower. So I still need to be able to convert it over, and that's the process that I'm going through. So once I do have that, I've essentially have my Polygon Matic in that sense in my actual wallet. Now I'm going to go through the process of creating my Polygon safe. So now we have the Matic that we need, but I can go through the process of creating the same wallet addresses, wallet A, B, C. I'm going to set 2 out of 3 owners. And you'll notice that that's in the top right section, you'll see that the network has changed here. And that we've changed essentially on Gnosis Safe, just the network, and we're able to create now a safe on the Polygon side of things so that we can complete our second step, which is, is to create the secondary multi-sig wallet that we're going to be transferring our funds over to. But again, I want you to look again here. We're looking at the transaction costs. It's 0.02 Matic in that sense. Again, very, very cheap in terms of you'll see the transaction costs just be much quicker. And again, another reason why it's interesting to be able to kind of convert or in that sense bridge those tokens over to Polygon, because that you're essentially just creating the same functionality that you might have, or if you're using it for utility or any other functionality with your token. It's a very interesting way to be able to have all the same functionality, but for a cheaper cost in that sense. So once we've gone through, we have established our Polygon. We have also our Ethereum Gnosis Safe in that sense. So we have both of them. Everything is done. You'll actually see that the transactions, if you go through this process, the safe is actually much quicker in terms of the contract deployment than it is on Polygon, because it's not, even at this time, the network was quite congested. So you can kind of see that if you go through this process, it will be significantly faster and cheaper, as you guys kind of saw. At the very early beginning, I think the cost was about $9 to $10 just to deploy the Gnosis Safe contract. And here there was only like 0.02 Matic. So the cost difference is significant too. So now that we have both of our safes, the next step is going to is really to be able to finally get at the step that we saw at the very beginning, which is the safe bridge, which is here. So Polygon has this this existing functionality. You can go to safe-bridge.polygon technology. What this does is it allows you to it only supports Gnosis Safes at this time, but when you do log in, you're able to see on the right-hand side, these are the two safes that were essentially created, both on the Ethereum side and the Polygon side of things. And then once you're in there, and you'll notice that I'm in the Ethereum safe side of things, I'm able to see the different types of tokens that are available for me to transfer. Now, at this time, ERC20 only supported ERC20 tokens are through this interface and through this app are supported. So XDAI is definitely like DAI is essentially a supported token. So basically creates like a wrap token version of that on the Polygon side of things. Direct Ethereum to Polygon isn't supported yet, but it is something that is coming that we're going to essentially allow you within your bridge safe be able to transfer or do those bridges from ETH directly into Polygon. And we saw those steps before. If you guys saw, trying to convert ETH to Polygon is still a little bit of a, sometimes a little bit of a convoluted step, unless you're buying directly from an exchange. And sometimes if you already have the ETH, it's like, why would I try to inject more money? I could try to convert some of my existing ETH into Polygon and get more bang for my buck in terms of the number of transactions. I also wanted to note that I did create a custom ERC20 token, and you'll see that it's not supported as well, but I will at the end mention some workarounds to be able to get some bridging those types of assets, the custom ERC20 tokens as well, even potentially custom like ERC721 assets over to Polygon in that sense, in terms of bridging and converting them over. So right now, XDAI is one of them. I loaded this contract or this Gnosis Safe with some DAI, and with there, I'm going to transfer it over to Polygon chain. The process is quite simple. You go to the bridge, you're saying, hey, I'm going to transfer a certain amount of DAI to the Polygon chain. And in this sense, it gives you an option to send it to somebody specifically, or you can send it off directly to another Gnosis safe. In this sense, that I did select the Polygon chain safe in this sense. And it allows you to also specify a nonce as an additional setting. Now, you could, if you wanted to, set a different order priority based off the nonce. And this, if you're familiar with wallet transactions in terms of setting the order in terms of the queue, I recommend if you're not too familiar with it, don't necessarily play around with it. You can just let it'll actually increment by itself. And basically what it's going to do is, depending on the number, lowest to highest, it will actually execute those transactions in order. And in terms of order priority, the thing that you have to be careful is if you set something like much higher in the other, if you're at step 5 or the nonce is at 5, and you set a transaction for nonce 10, it's got to wait for 6, 7, 8, 9 just to complete before it gets to 10 to be able to process that transaction. So be wary of that. You could actually modify in terms of saying, hey, I want this transaction to happen first and not happen. So there's, and you could do it in a particular way in that sense too. And when what we see here is I'm reviewing the transaction. I'm just transferring 10 DAI, and what it is being transferred over to Polygon, proof of stake. And all it's going to do is it's going to require 2 signatures, because I set this wallet to require 2 signatures to approve this transaction. So you'll see a first signature that kind of comes up in terms of the transaction. A prompt will kind of come up in this way. It says, okay, well, I need you to just sign it, confirm it. No money has been transacted yet, so no ETH has been used. We're just looking at specifically the signing request to approve the transaction, and it's going to need 2 other people to sign it. So once we do, we have the second person that we switch wallets, and we're able to then sign it to approve it. Then you can have any one of the 3 owners essentially execute the transaction, as long as they have ETH within their wallet to be able to execute it. In this sense, we see here again, wallet A has spending about $5.40 for this transaction. And if you look at this again, this is this transaction, it's pretty high. But again, we're transferring a wrapped version of it over to Polygon, and it's going to be the equivalent, and we're just going to be able to use it on the Polygon side for way more transactions in terms of the cost. The cost savings are just going to be astronomical in that sense. So once that's done, you can imagine that the process time still takes a little bit of time. So it can take up to 30 minutes for these transactions. So it is getting a little bit faster, but those bridges do exist. And once you do have this transaction over, you're saving a significant amount of money over on the bridge side on the Polygon network side of things. So now that the transaction's kind of gone through, this already actually had some POS DAI in it, or proof of stake DAI in it on the Polygon network. We can see in our Gnosis safe on the Polygon side that that transaction is actually being complete. Right. So we see that there's zero matic in the sense, but we have successfully transferred over ETH DAI mapped into Polygon DAI. And that side on the Ethereum network has been burnt and completely transferred over and bridged over onto the Polygon network.
Now, Manny, I had a quick question here.
Sure.
When we've moved our DAI and some Ethereum over to Polygon, I assume we're going to need some matic in our wallet in order to perform our first transaction. What do you recommend there? Are they going to need to bridge over some wrapped matic as well, or is there an easier way?
It depends what you're planning to do with it, right? Like if, because a lot of the times it depends if you're processing the transaction, and usually it's the wallet owner that actually processes it. You can, you think of it as more like the safe in this side is just like a storage for some of that matic. You'd essentially be using it to be able to any process transactions, still some of the safe wallet owners. So you don't necessarily, when you have the, the stable coin here and you wanted to transfer it out to somebody, still go through the same process of requiring 2 signatures, and then whatever the wallet that had, that wants to execute the transaction, they're going to be responsible to essentially paying the bill. So whoever, it's unfortunate. It's like the last person to leave the table is paying the bill. But obviously, if you're trying to, get putting a proposal down in terms of transferring to somebody, you do want you could get anybody if you wanted to be able to kind of process that transaction too.
That makes sense to me. And if you've used Gnosis Safe before, I'm sure you know what we're talking about. If you haven't, when you try it, you'll see exactly what we mean there, where it's the initiator that's or you say, is it the last signature that that pays the fee?
No, it doesn't have to be the last one, but it sometimes feel that way because it's usually the person who wants to get things done. But all it is as long as you have the required signatures, any of the owners can actually process the transaction afterwards. Like, so whoever is wanting to pay the bill in that sense.
Beautiful.
So, yeah. So that said, now we have it on Gnosis Safe. we're good to go that we've actually processed that transaction, but we can actually bridge it backwards too, which is great. So if you want to see that process, I do recommend you go through this yourself. One thing to note though, right now, because Gnosis Safe is still working on this, this is actually, and I've spent actual money here, transferring all these tokens back and forth in the actual transactions, because this is not actually done in the testnet. And this is something that Gnosis Safe is working on there to add Mumbai network in that sense. But right now, this is just one of the supports are specifically for Ethereum and specifically for Polygon. Gnosis Safe does support a wide variety of different other networks, such as, Gurley as a testnet as well. But Mumbai is just not there yet, but it is coming soon, I believe. In that sense, you'd be using this. Ideally, you'd be using this in real life scenarios where you're actually, bridging. If you're worried about transaction costs, right, then you probably have some actual, live token and live money in that sense being able to kind of transact. So this is a great way to be able to kind of transfer back and forth. And like I mentioned, in here, we're actually in the Polygon safe, Gnosis Safe, and I'm transferring back that DAI back onto the Ethereum chain, back into the other Ethereum safe. So you can do that. You can do it, that process. Again, it can take 20, 30 minutes in terms of that processing transaction. But once it's on there, ideally you do like a lump sum of as many tokens as you want to, and then you can interact with them and do it in a way. Ideally, if you're doing it like if you had a way where you had like a DAO where you're using it as a utility and you're like, hey, we established our token to start off with Ethereum, but we're really wanting to use it more and more in terms of like, we just want heavy amounts of transaction. We're seeing a lot of transactions and people are complaining like, hey, wow, these transaction costs they're costing quite a bit. This could be a way for you're like, hey guys, we're doing a migration completely over to Polygon. And we're going to move our existing token over to Polygon to be able to handle those transactions. Again, this is only for supported ERC20 tokens like DAI and a few others. But there is a way for you to be able to do that also with custom tokens, and that's probably going to come later, and I talk about that too. But it's a great way for you to kind of migrate over and make that migration in terms of see that cost savings as well. Now, what about ERC20 tokens that are not supported in terms of Gnosis Safe? So this would probably be more on this is not supported in that bridge app in that sense, where you saw that there was a custom ERC20 token, and you want to bridge it over. In this case, there is actually an additional feature that you can kind of do. You can go to mapper.polygon.technology. And what this does, you can actually do Ethereum to Matic. You can do also Gurley to Mumbai. And you can submit your token that you want mapped, and it will actually do the mapping process to be able to create that token on the Polygon side as well. And you can test this with Gurley, which is great. So on the other side that we saw, this was like a turnkey solution that was really for Gnosis Safe. This is a little bit more hands-on in terms of like a little bit more intermediate of handling those transactions. You would actually be processing them in terms of, you'd go on like Etherscan and do a transaction to be able to actually make those transfers. So it's a little bit more hands-on in that sense, but it is a possibility for you to be able to map certain tokens. The major issue that you will see though with this is that sometimes that mapping process, because it's a little bit different and because there's some nuances between tokens, it might take a lot longer. And sometimes we've seen it take, myself included, it's taken a day for me, almost a full day for this mapping to go through. So the process happens in the background. You don't pay for anything. It does it automatically. And once it does the mapping, you're pretty much, you have a one-to-one in terms of your custom ERC20 token. And then you have your custom ERC20 token on Polygon network that's mapped, and it's done for you. So this is a great tool to be able to do that as well if you want to do some more custom ERC20 tokens and even custom 721s and 1155s as well in terms of mapping them. There is another thing that you can do, and this is one of the last things. This is very, very, very hands-on. So this requires no mapping at all. So there's not a process where you have to wait. This can be built all by yourself. This is way more hands-on and it's more technical. And I definitely recommend, if you have the time, go through this. This is a Flex portal or FX portal. They have a contract or multiple contracts that allow you to deploy basically the type of contracts that would be needed to be able to essentially map your what they call like a root ERC token to a child token, which would be on the Polygon side of things. And what this does, and I probably won't get too technical because it's really getting into the depths of how the network works, but it's a way to be able to essentially communicate from Ethereum data and read on and interacted with on the Polygon network. And this is a very, if you have the time and you want to dive into this deeper, this is a really interesting way to be able to see how they use events and how that's picked up by certain layers within Polygon to be able to then process those transactions on Polygon's network as well. And you can do, they have examples for ERC20 tokens, 721, and a few others in terms of just passing messages back and forth between Ethereum and Polygon. So it is definitely way more work, but if you're somebody who wants to dive in deeper and say, hey, I want to do custom functionality with my contracts, I want to do, I want more control over it, I want to have a specific templating system for the actual ERC20 token that has custom functionality, and I want to be able to pass certain data back and forth between Ethereum and Polygon, this would be the way to go. And the nice thing about this is it supports, mainnet, Gurley, Polygon mainnet, as well as Mumbai. So if you have the time, go to github.com/fx-portal/contracts. They have a few examples. This is a great way to be able to dive deeper in terms of porting those custom tokens or custom contracts over to Polygon network. And that is it. That's basically the entire presentation. I hope you guys like the screenshots because going through it with the actual live examples sometimes took like 30 minutes per transaction just to be able to wait for things to kind of go through. But yeah, happy to answer any questions anybody might have in regards to this.
Thank you so much for that, Manny. Really, really great presentation on Gnosis Safe there and how you can use that with Polygon. I want to just emphasize a little bit for our community and hackathon participants that are watching now. You're probably thinking to yourself, do I need a multi-signature wallet for my dApp? The answer is yes, you do. And here's why. If you are building a dApp today and you are thinking, this is my first hackathon and I'm just trying something out. Well, what if your dApp catches on and becomes something with, 50 to 100 users within the first month? And then you 10x within the second month. And then before you know it, you have thousands of users. You can't implement multi-sig then. You need to already have it in place. Now, of course, there are things that you could do, inform your community that you're going to be introducing new contracts, all sorts of remediation and backpedaling. Or you could think today, when you're first building your dApp, I need multi-sig, and get started with that. And these are the tips that you're going to need to get going with that. So I implore you, consider it. Consider how much time you might save yourself later on. And you're also going to learn a lot about how multi-signature wallets work. And it will give you an opportunity, if you're working with a team, to have more collaboration before you make before you actually initiate on-chain functions together. I personally have used Multi-Sig Wallet with a group before. It is a great tool, and it really does force you to work together a little bit more before placing your transactions, but that's good practices to get in the habit of anyway. Manny, do you have anything else to add there? I do see we have at least one question in the chat.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's it not only like you might want to. It's good to be able to kind of do these things ahead of time when you're trying to build out your apps and kind of like foresee how that kind of future-proof it essentially, which would be great. But what I've also seen in terms of development, on the development side of things, is like when you're in the weeds of it, as working for like some other previous companies, it's actually great to be able to it's a way to be able to kind of hold keys. So let's say, you had to process a specific transaction. It's really, really annoying when you have to like wait on one specific person that kind of holds the single transaction to be able to prove things or prove transactions. And you're like, hey, I hey, I got to get a hold of John and John's away, et cetera, right? But I need to be able to approve this transaction, kind of go through, right? It's a great way to be able to say, hey, I want to have access to these keys or access to these tokens to use maybe on an RPC or et cetera, and have like multiple owners in that sense to be able to prove that transaction. So it's not, I always got like in web development, we have that expression. It's like I'm not going to do it justice, but it's the hit by the bus rule, right? Where it's like if a developer is hit by a bus, are they and they're gone, which is unfortunate. What happens to their work and to their code? Is that transferable in that sense? So this is a great way to kind of protect against that. And not to mention, there is, I believe, Rainbow Kit on the front end with WAGMI as a library, kind of supports Gnosis Safe in terms of signing into transactions. So it's already built in. You guys can do this with your front end. That's a really great way to kind of approve those things, and they have a great app to be able to kind of handle those the signed signatures to be able to sign in for things. So
that's a great point, Manny. I mean, we don't often like to think about that, but the truth is you should always have a contingency plan. Something that that I coach the people that I work with on is if anytime you're working on something, try to produce a system that's repeatable and that somebody else can work within. And this is an example of how we can build those composable and transferable systems into the base architecture of what we're building and just make our stuff more professional right from the start. Because the more we plan for stuff like that, the more that when crises do occur, they don't completely derail our projects and they allow us to keep going and hopefully still have success in spite of setbacks. I did see a question here. Says, curious, I might have missed it, but why does the mapping take 24 hours? I believe he's specifically asking about custom ERC20 tokens, so not the pre-supported list. I assume that's because of what needs to happen on the back end in order to transfer the contracts.
Yeah, so it's a little bit more complicated. So because like if you have like, if they're, you'll notice that like on the Polygon bridge side of things, like that app is like the Safe Bridge, like it already has approved tokens because it knows what its one-to-one is. Like on the other side of things, you can still do modifications. Like what you have to do when you're actually deploying an ERC20 token and you want to get it mapped, you still have to, validate the contract. So that way, like you can do it on either scan. So they can actually see all the code, but you can do adjustments on the Polygon side where you're like, hey, but I don't want to allow minting to happen. So I only allow token transfers from Ethereum to Polygon. And those minute adjustments to the actual contract are things that take a lot longer. And then you can imagine that there's also a queue of building out these contracts as well. It kind of takes process. So it does definitely take time. What's the shortest time it's taken? I've seen people on Stack Overflow say, 3 hours. I've myself, even today, I did it again. It took me, I think it took about 8 hours. So like almost like a full day. But I've also seen people say 1 to 3 days on their side of things. And again, it depends on the network. I don't know what that queue looks like, or if we have a system internally to be able to see what that queue looks like. But I imagine it's just like, it's a lengthy queue of just different transactions, and not just, you have to think of it, it's not just for mainnet, it's for also testnet as well. So on Gurley and Mumbai.
So the lesson there is if you're planning on migrating a DeFi asset to Polygon for this hackathon, probably a good idea to start working on that sooner than later, so you allow for the extra time with populating those contracts and things like that. And of course, we have a link in Discord to Polygon support. Go ahead and check the announcements channel there, and there's a list of links to each of our sponsors there. Manny, did you have anything else to add as we're wrapping up here? And I'm also going to ask if you have time to join us in GatherTown. I know I'm putting you on the spot right now, but we'll be meeting in GatherTown right after this workshop.
I love GatherTown. I would be happy to join GatherTown for a little bit. So yes, I would definitely down for that. Will say that these hackathons, and again, great that Morales and Google has put this together, because I find that this, including GatherTown, it's a great place to network, and it's a great place to just meet people. I've met so many people, even in GatherTowns, like as well, that people I've met, and they've gotten jobs or gotten sponsored to go to events, and just through talking through spaces like GatherTown, funny enough. And there's a lot of opportunities that come from that. So I definitely will be attending as well.
Perfect. That's awesome to hear. We have a session in GatherTown coming up right after this stream. Click the link in the description right now so that you can create your character and join us there. Manny, stick with me after the live stream here, and I'll get you a link. On that note, I look forward to seeing all of you at the next live stream or in GatherTown, and have a wonderful rest of the day.